Hey, I want to welcome on to the show Adam Sparks, Knox News, Tennessee football beat reporter, investigative reporter. Adam, a lot going on, man. We were joking off air, man. There's never a dull moment here on this beat, is there?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, once we got past the Pruitt investigation and the hearing and all those years, you thought, okay, now we can kind of settle into, a quiet period and just football and sports and all that. And wasn't too many months till we're back here again. It feels a little bit like Groundhog Day. All the Pruitt investigation stuff was always late nights and linking to old stories and copy and paste where the case is, and that's sort of where we are right now. I think this one will go a lot quicker than that one, but you never know when you're dealing with the NCAA. I feel like during the Pruitt stuff, I had to cram for a test and know all these terms that have to do with the NCAA, and I washed that out of my memory because I thought I wasn't going to take another test. And now I'm going back to my cheat sheet.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some similarities. Also, who knows how long this can take when it's all said and done, with courts and all that. But in the grand scheme of things, kind of what do you make of all this? All right, I mean, NCAA's been poking around campus for a little while, not just with football. They've talked to basketball players. They've talked to some others as well. SI report came out and kind of broke that news the other day, and then Donde Plowman, fires back, and she stood her ground on Wednesday as well, and talking with the student newspaper over there. And you've got senators, speaking out on behalf of Tennessee, governors, you've got attorneys, Tom Mars, representing Spire Sports Group. All this is kind of, it goes to show you that this has all been ready to roll for quite some time, just dotting the T's and crossing the, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But it's been kind of wild to see all this kind of come together in a span of a little over 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think my take is this is not nothing. I think what I got a lot from Tennessee fans was initially was a little bit of panic, mostly around Nico football, just quick fears there. And then I think that subsided pretty quickly. And as Tennessee, really as Donde Plowman's letter came out, I think there was more of a settling down. And a lot of Tennessee fans that I talked to late in the afternoon yesterday were kind of like, well, this is okay. It's going to blow over. Looks like Tennessee's got it under control. They're going to take NCAA to court if they need to. So I think I've kind of experienced different extremes on that. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think Tennessee fans should panic over this. I do think they should be concerned, though, because reading between the lines, I think Tennessee has some reasonable concerns. If Tennessee thought this was a nothing burger, Donde Plowman wouldn't have come out so aggressively. She's trying to nip this thing in the bud. She's trying to get ahead of it. And I think if she just thought this would just come and go and be nothing, I think she wouldn't have gone with the vinegar. She went with honey and with the NCAA in the Pruitt investigation. She's going with vinegar now, or napalm, or gasoline, or something. So let's let this play out, I guess, is my take. But I do think there's at least should be some reasonable concern. And if you stack this on top of the Pruitt stuff, completely separate. But Tennessee did avoid the lack of institutional control in that one. When you stack back-to-back cases up, you're always afraid that the first one could hurt you in the second one.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, the bigger battle, if you will, fighting against the NCAA for, rights of name, image, and likeness, and, what's unconstitutional and all that type of stuff. I mean, but really, when you channel it in for Tennessee, you read between those lines from what Donde Plowman put out the other day. I mean, it sounds like one of those infractions, those level 1 infractions, is going to be a lack of institutional control, because she pretty much says, how in the world could you parade us around and say that we're the model citizens and we did it all right, and then less than 6 months later say that we lack that control? And so and again, I'm not anybody that, is super, super, super in the know on this type of stuff, but I mean, how in the world is Tennessee going to get by twice without a postseason bowl ban or something like that when it comes to lack of institutional control? That would be where my biggest fear is in this whole thing, more than anything, for the immediate impact and how this affects Tennessee football.
Yeah, one thing on Tennessee's side, and we saw this during the Pruitt case, is that the NCAA supposedly is trying to shy away from using postseason bans. Yeah, now, you can see them making an exception again, if you're stacking two cases on top of another right back to back like this. Yeah, I think institutional control's on the table. Otherwise, Dondi wouldn't have mentioned it in her letter. It's a concern that's the one that jumped out to me because that's the only thing that could get you to a postseason ban. I wonder in some of this if it seems to me if you look at the Florida State case and the Florida case that's ongoing and now Tennessee, and you've heard as well as I have, there's going to be more after this in the SEC and other Power 5 conferences. Like there's a list of NILs they're going after. I wonder if the target, rightly or wrongly, is as much the collectives as it is the athletes or the schools. I thought Dondi Plowman sort of threaded a needle pretty well there of standing beside the NIL collective, standing beside Spire, but also having enough distance between the university and the collective, which you need if you're going to make the case that that what goes on between a collective and an athlete that's their business, and it doesn't have to be tied to the university. That's their best approach to this. But yeah, the lack of institutional control is what you have to be afraid of. That's for sure.
Yeah, and again, the question's been out there: will there ever be another postseason, ban in any sports from the NCAA? Because they are trying to shy away from that. But when you have two lack of institutional controls in just less than a year, essentially, that makes you wonder. We'll see kind of how this plays out. You mentioned it's more or less looking like the NCAA is going after the collective, and that's how I see this, right? The NCAA is going after Spire Sports, okay? And Mike Wilson, I know both you guys have written about it over at Knox News. There's a flight that's in question. It's reported on by the New York Times. I would assume they got that from the NCAA. That's my opinion. And the question is, was he essentially, early in 2022, was he a client of Spire Sports? And if he was, and Spire paid for the flight, then technically that's not breaking the recruiting rules. However, if you're going to look at it from a retroactive standpoint, it gets all kind of fuzzy. So it's the NCAA saying, going back in May of 2022, saying we're going to go back the last 10 months and we're going to look into all these retroactive, activities, and we're going to pop you for that. That's kind of what Tennessee's fighting right now. It feels like an uphill battle for the NCAA. It does. But in the same sense, Adam, they got to show that they're still an entity, right? They got to show that the paychecks are still coming in. I feel like they're going to be taking their losses. They've already taken some losses, but they're going to keep swinging, and that's kind of what this is.
They have to justify their existence. Yep. And that's what they've been trying to do the last few years. And at this era, I think they could sort of fade back and just let the checks keep coming in, similar to how like the NFL commissioner does. I don't have power, but you guys pay me, so I'm going to hang around and not ruffle feathers. They could do it that way, or they could flex their muscle and try to get back some of the power that they've lost. They're trying to do the latter with this. And I don't know how that's going to end, because Tennessee has a lot of support behind it. That's for sure. It was funny, as soon as this went down, I contacted the Attorney General, which has now filed a lawsuit. And I contacted his people and said, hey, this is going on. Any chance you could weigh in? And the response I got was, absolutely, we're ready to go. So, the pieces were in place for sure for this to go. I'll be curious to see how much like that, the New York Times article, the flight and all that associated with Nico, if that's a small part of this or if that's the big part of this. He was the poster child of NIL early on. He got one of those large lucrative deals reportedly. And, the NCAA is targeting those players and are targeting those recruiting classes. If you were a high profile part of NIL because your whole recruiting class or a specific athlete, they're going to try to come after you again retroactively. I think it's so peculiar when we get done with this. Like, one of the conversations there, like you just said, is like a booster that allegedly provided a flight. And I think there's this weird naiveness with the NCAA that somehow a person associated with the collective would not also be a booster of that school. You know what I mean? Like, if the collective has assets that it's using and benefits and perks that it's using to its clients, to its employees, those are going to be coming, at least indirectly, from boosters. It's not like there are just rando people out there that are just part of a collective that have no part in the school. Like, if you had a Venn diagram of NIL collective members and boosters, it's one circle on top of another. It's the same group.
Yeah.
So I think as we get further into this, the NCAA, you have to be scratching your head and saying, what are you talking about? I think the retroactive action is interesting too. If you go back to, like, Nico committed in March of 2022, go 7 weeks past that, and the NCAA announced that it was going to retroactively enforce its rules. And one part of that was that it was going to judge some collectives. In some instances, it would judge collectives as if they were boosters. I don't think it's an accident that came right after Nico committed and reportedly signed a big NIL deal. But again, how do you retroactively, how do you pull me over for speeding and say, hey, the speed limits, you're going to be speeding in a week. I'm going to get you for what the speed limit's going to be a week from now instead of now. It's really strange. And the SEC is probably going to have to step in here, though. And I don't know if Greg Sankey will do that or not, but I think that's sort of the last chip. That's the biggest chip that Tennessee needs to play.
Yeah, I mean, the whole situation's bizarre. I mean, I used that similar, example on the show yesterday. Like, hey, the speed limit on my road changed a couple months ago. It went from 35 to 25. Knox PD coming and giving me a ticket saying, hey, you were going 35 a year ago yesterday. Here's your ticket. I mean, it makes no sense. And so, again, if the flight happened and if Nico was a client of Spire Sports Group agency, there was no rule at the time that would forbid, paying for a flight or whatever the case may be. And now the NCAA is trying to go back and say, well, we're going to implement these rules and retroactively punish you. Again, that's kind of the whole situation here. So, we'll see what happens. I think, Adam, last question I have for you. I think it's unique. I think it's cool to see all the, the backing of Tennessee. It's kind of like, armed forces all against one type situation. It's been kind of cool to see the last 24 hours. And Tennessee could be fighting the fight for every collective and every university out there in college football potentially. But I think fans and people want to know right now, how does this affect Tennessee right now? How does this affect not even recruiting for 2025? How does this affect Tennessee right now, Nico 2024? I think the assumption is Nico's going to be fine and play and Tennessee can compete for a championship. But still, I think that's the biggest fear right now for Tennessee fans.
I think aside from the obvious doomsday fears, postseason ban, anything to do with Nico's eligibility, again, that's complete speculation. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But aside from those doomsday worst case scenario fears, I think the thing that maybe from a human side that I feel for the Tennessee teams, football specifically, is that there's now going to be a cloud over that program again. And they just went through, I mean, this is the 5th year in a row that the football program has an NCAA cloud over it. And the guys here had nothing to do with the previous one. And we don't even know if they really did anything wrong in this one. Yeah. And, Tennessee's coaches are recruiting right now. They're trying to put together a good class. They just got some good players in the portal. They're revving up for Nico in spring practice. And if this goes how other NCAA cases have gone, even the quick ones in NIL, those have gone quicker than others, you're still looking at like an extended period of time when the whole program is in limbo. And that just doesn't seem fair. It seems like this should be in and out, get it done, have a decision, because you and I both know if we get to spring practice or something and Nico's out there, we're going to have to ask him something about this, or we're going to have to ask Josh Heupel something about this. You don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. We'll do it because it's our jobs, but it seems unfair. Just get the cloud off of this and move on. But, teams around the SEC are absolutely negatively recruiting against Tennessee, and they were doing that anyway, and now they just have some more fuel. And if you're Tennessee, you want that off of you as quick as possible.
Yep, same situation, another cloud, another NCAA investigation. Adam, you'll be tracking this, for however long it takes. What else you have coming out, the rest of this week as we kind of learn more about what's to come here for Tennessee?
Yeah, at knoxnews.com, we're going to keep reacting to this. I think probably a lot of what we're going to do is sort of go back in time and look at the timeline and some of the arguments that the NCAA is going to try to make, because at some point they have to pin down what they're looking at. And, and from there, we'll just sort of react and Donde Plowman has not been quiet, and I don't think she's going to get quiet anytime soon. So that's sort of the entertainment part I think I'm going to find in it.
Yeah, same here. Again, honey in the last one. It's vinegar this time for sure for Dante Plowman. Adam, thanks so much, man. Appreciate the time.
Yep, good to be on.